Hi everyone. Once again, many thanks for your nice wishes on my birthday. I was actually born in 1944, so yeah, I'm not that young. In fact, I'm blooming old. Anyhow, look, I'm going to have a little ramble today. We'll start it off with these little bulbs. Now, a lot of you probably won't recognise these. If you're in America, you probably will. I first come across these when, as a kid, I went to America, and they were in a little nightlight, I suppose you would call it. It plugged into their normal sockets, and they gave a little light. The voltage on these, in fact, varies. You can get them in 240 volts, but mainly in 110 volts, about 7.5 watts. They're, well, as I say, they're fairly common in America, but over here they're quite rare. Now this brings me on to an interesting point. Now I did say it was going to be a bit of a ramble today. I'm going back to the 1960s. My father had just got a different job. He was a joiner at the firm of Spillers. I think I can mention the name. I don't think the firm's in existence anymore. But they had an office in London, and the house was called Old Change House. I believe it's no longer there. It was near St Paul's, and on certain Sundays I was allowed to actually go in with him and see what was happening. It was quite interesting, really. I know about that time the 706 phone had been introduced, and they were quite new at that time. The 60s were quite a time ago, and I also can remember the night watchman was given a nice little radio. It was a Perdio Continental. I've got a couple of those upstairs here in the loft. It had beautiful sound. Mind you, it was only on AM. VHF for portable radios was not the done thing then. They came out a little bit later with the introduction of a particular type of transistor, an OC171, if I can remember. Mullard brought it out, either a 171 or a 170. There was a transistor which allowed higher frequencies to be used in a VHF radio receiver. Anyhow, drifting off to what I was talking about. In this building, like many buildings that have got several floors, there were some lifts. And I can remember these clearly. I'd never seen anything like it at the time. As you walked into the office, you were greeted by these, I think there was 3-4 lifts. One was the director's lift, which was obviously kept nice and clean, and the other one was for the normal staff. Anyhow, the first thing you noticed about these, there was no windows or anything in the doors. This seems to be the modern age now. Years ago they did have windows in them, but these didn't. But above each car or lift entrance was a sign, "This car up," and that would obviously indicate which was the next car that was going to go up, because that was on the ground floor. Only one went down to the lower ground where my father worked, and it was rather interesting because the lift motor, which I would have loved to have had a look at inside, all I could see it was sort of peeping through a little grill. They were Otis, and there was I don't quite understand what it was. They looked like a metal strip which moved slowly as the lifts move. Someone out there will be able to explain. The gentleman I'm thinking of would definitely be able to explain. These lifts were new to this country. I understand they were imported from America. How true this is, I don't know. I'm only going what my father was told, and he was told by the lift engineer who came to maintain them. And the English people didn't really understand them, though it was completely different. Anyhow, the knobs for the control, or the control buttons, were quite large, round, a pair up and down. And at a later date they brought out another system of knobs, not on these lifts but on later Otis lifts, which were just touch buttons. You put your finger near the button, there's no moving parts, just the closeness of your finger and the static made them operate. Anyhow, what I'm coming on to, inside the lift, I believe it was inside, and mind you, it was a few years ago, so I can't always remember. There was, well, let's forget that. Let's go back to the little lights at the landings where you'd press to go up or go down, whatever the case may be. Press to go up, press to go down. On the ground, on the basement, there was obviously just the one button, and at the top was only one button, but all the others had two buttons. I think it was red and green. But anyhow, while I mentioned that, the lamps behind those were one of these. It's a lamp which you don't often see over here, but they were used in these old now, but at the time modern, Otis lifts. The screw cap, I've left a little coin there so you get an indication of the size. The screw cap is actually a candelabra. It's a thread which is not found over here. When I say not found over here, they were about in the 60s on these lifts, and the filaments of the lamps were quite hard wearing, so obviously being switched on and off, they didn't want to blow. But also, I believe these were set inside the lift, was each floor would light up independently. So as the lift was going up, you would have these indicators, floor 1 up to whatever the height of the building was. And behind each one of those was one of these lamps. So they were quite useful in those days. Yeah, I did mention the motor room was on the lower ground. So this was probably something they did do. Normally you expect the lift engine or motor room to be up on the top, but not in this case. And as I say, I'd have dearly loved to have seen inside, but in those days things were totally different. All doors were locked, and the only people that had special keys to unlock the lift, or rather unlock the doors, was the main engineer in the building, who I did see him open the door up with an unusual tool, which I believe are probably quite common now, but I wouldn't advise anyone doing that. Anyway, that's nearly finished my little ramblings. It was a long time ago. The building has long since gone. It was Spillers. They made flour and owned various cat foods and dog foods. I think Keno Meat was one of those, and Cato Meat. And they also had various bakeries around the country. I remember one in Scotland they had called Billslands Better Bread. But anyway, I could talk for hours. I'm not going to. Finally ending with this looked quite a good building, and they could really grow some nice plants. If I can remember rightly, the staircase leading up on the ground floor, they had a large rubber plant. and that looks really well. So it just shows you a building that's nicely warm can do nice things with the plants. Anyway, I'm going to shut up now. Any comments please make. As I say, I'm thinking of one person that will probably know these lifts inside out. Very knowledgeable. I've spoken to him before on various things. And the last thing was on something where some of the stupid things that people were doing on lifts, which, well, I can't believe half the time. Funny enough, I nearly joined a lift firm as a job, but the GPO one, fortunately for me, it appears I'm terrified of heights, and even watching some of the antics the bloody fools get up to, hanging on counterweights and doing stupid things, they call it surfing, it turns my stomach and it turns me legs to rubber, and I'm sitting in an easy chair in the front room watching it on TV. So no way I like heights. Anyhow, I'm going to finish talking now. Obviously no names mentioned, people, but a lot of you probably know the person that gets up to these, in my opinion, stupid things, and it's going to end in death. I'm blooming sure of it. So, you know. But the other gentleman I was speaking about, he does know his stuff, and he's obviously very careful and is very educated when it comes to lifts. In those days, the other main lifts that you came across in this country was the Express Lift Company. I think they had a place in Northampton. They had a tower, test tower. J&E Hall. Benny lifts, which you would pass on the train going uptown, their red sign. I think it was Benny Lifts and Escalators. Platt Slindler, Marriott and Scott, Aldous Campbell, Hammond and Champness, High Power. High Power was interesting. They had a lift in the Royal Institution. It wasn't working because the hydraulic mains is no longer in existence in London. But it was quite an interesting lift. I remember rightly, it had a rope going through it, and you would pull it one way to go up and the other way to go down. So, you know, it's quite interesting. And also, I have seen, only in print, a neon lamp. Whether it was ever brought to production, I don't know. It was under the name Marriott or Scott, which I associate with Marriott and Scott lifts. It was in a very old publication of patents and things, and it showed you a neon lamp like the Beehive, but this lamp had two electrodes arranged as arrows pointing up and pointing down depending which arrow was lit, and something to do with the motor in the lift and the lighting up of the electrode showed which way the lift was going to go. So you had those presumably on each landing. Whether they came into use, I honestly don't know. It was a book of patents, which is quite an interesting book actually. Anyhow, I'm going to shut up now. I've been going on for a blooming long time. I'm going to run the battery out of this if I'm not careful. So once again, any comments please make. As I say, I probably brought back some memories. I will give it these type of talks occasionally on various things that I can remember. As being an old codger now, I do remember a lot of these things. It seems things that happened yesterday. I'm buggered if I can remember them. But things that happened in my youth, including trams, trolley buses, I do remember. So once again, many thanks. Thank you.